So to move away from the World War III global aspect, and we'll kind of hone in a bit more on what's going on in the United Kingdom to finish up here. We're going to actually open up with the Prime Minister addressing the violence. Many people, when they first saw this, I'm going to switch screens real quick. Many people, when they first saw this, what was going on, they couldn't believe their eyes, or rather, they couldn't believe their ears. As many large accounts called this man to be a traitor, the Prime Minister. Particularly one of the larger accounts, Sargon of Akkad, who is Carl Benjamin, who again is a very notorious, I can't say notorious, I guess maybe that's the right word, because he's disliked and liked equally, I would find, especially because a political figure, also has been, slamming the wall against the rhetoric that's been coming out of the party, especially a lot of what's going on with the UK government, honestly being very upfront about there being sides in this conflict. And in particular, it's going to actually kind of go back and reflect upon some of the stuff that Nick Fuentes said as well. And I'll tell you right now, I think more often than not, and I think particularly, the strife is being bubbled up because it is on a racial basis. I think particularly that rings true in the UK. I think that's actually coming here to the US as well. I mean, it's already here. What am I saying? But in the particulars of the UK, it is definitely racial. But what's seemingly being astroturfed is that it's Islamophobia, and that it's actually like religious based. Where I think more often than not, you would find the average person's probably cares less that they believe in Islam, but cares more that they're simply just not, they just don't look like them, they don't share the same values as them, which therefore stems closer to a racial kind of difference and discrimination than it does Islamic. And you'll see a bit of what I mean here as we go through some of these slides here. But first, we do have Prime Minister Keir Starmer's full address to the nation about the riots on Britain's streets. We'll go here right now. And again, anything wrong with the sound, please let me know. I'll adjust accordingly.
Those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law-breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action.
Now, I would like to point out too, especially with the audience, I can imagine that you could also probably share the sentiment. How long, how many years do you think that you've been hearing about the stabbings and the gang raping and the grooming gangs going on in the UK? And not once did you ever see an address from the Prime Minister that ever reached this level of vitriol towards the people engaging in those actions. But the one time you have a pressure valve release where people finally decide to stand up for themselves, largely white, and what's being denominated as far right. Who knows? I haven't been able to verify many of that. I think a lot of people put the blame on Tommy Robinson, but we'll get into that. And again, it shows you that the government has essentially already picked its side. And I think really when a lot of people hear this rhetoric being espoused against them for once they stand up for themselves, amid all of the immigration and violence and senseless violence at that, these words cut like a knife to those who have been living through it and going through it, which I think is why you see so many people just outright being like, you are a traitor.
And all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice. Our police deserve our support as they tackle any and all violent disorder that flares up. Whatever the apparent cause or motivation, we make no distinction. Crime is crime, and this government will tackle it. Thank you. So, 2 questions, Rob.
Now, I'm not going to even care to listen to the questions, but that was his address, and I didn't really even realize there was a larger clip portion. I thought it was just the 2.5 minute version. The sentiment really that was going back and forth yesterday, and there's really 2 large camps that are speaking to this, and Fuentes is kind of leading the one. How do I put this? There's 2 big camps, really. Okay. There's the one camp which is closer to the Groypers, the Fuentes' crowd. Forget, my beard looks pretty bad. And then you have the bigger camp, which is essentially the rest of the dissident right, or the right wing in general. The larger camp believes that this is organic. They believe that the sentiment has been building up for a while. I think that is true. But in terms of the particulars, many people in the camp that thinks it's inorganic find this to be a chance to not only just engage in another January 6th kind of event where now all these people's faces and names all get recognized, all these pourings of videos, all of these people will now be, essentially deemed and dinged as far-right thuggery, or really in their terms, probably more so close to terrorists. And the reason why I think the Fuentes crowd finds it to be inorganic, and at least in their argument, I am not on that side. I find that the sentiment that these people share is probably definitely very, very real, especially amid the migrants stabbing those 3 kids and a lot more. It was really 3 kids that passed away. Many more were injured in that stabbing attack from, again, an immigrant. It wasn't from a native. I think 2 things can be true at the same time. I think that not only can that sentiment be there from these people and them come out of their woodwork and see other people engaging in that violence and burning down these hotels like the Rutherford and other instances in like Leeds and Southport, but also that it could have been stirred up and initiated from a truly inorganic source. And that's where Tommy Robinson comes in, who is this big far-right figure, who is also a known Zionist, who has been pointed out by Nick Fuentes as well. Now, I know people don't like these terms, but again, the show is offensively accurate. I will be as honest with you as possible. That's where you were getting into what he's dinging as the inorganic astroturf portion of it being, why is it seemingly that they're only pointing out, again, like what we saw in the address we just watched, attacking the mosques, attacking the Muslims, when really the sentiments against the immigrants and the disparity or lack of shared values, where he's saying, oh no, it's because they hate them because they're Muslim. And that's where it doesn't make sense, where it's like, okay, I understand why these people don't like the immigrants. Same thing's happening here in the States. But again, in the United States, everybody just like, would deport them all. They're not sitting there saying they hate Islam. They're saying they hate that their country is being invaded by people who don't share their American values. But all of a sudden, it's like this vibe shift is happening. I hate that I even said that. Is happening in the UK, where it's seemingly being only denoted as the far right's opposition to Islam and Muslims as a whole, as a religion, and less so about the actual color of their skin, the shared values, and the actions they engage in. So again, and we'll continue with this, right? So we'll go to here. The racial tensions continue. And so let me go ahead and knock some of these out here. And this is this particular individual who did, in fact, stab these, or killed 3 little girls, and he injured 10 others with a knife at a Taylor Swift themed dance party, or class, I guess is what he's saying here. And I can move myself out of the way. The photo they're using, which is all, oh, look at this scholarly lad, and then the actual, I don't think he looks really too bad there, but clearly the photo they're actually using on the left is to make him seem a bit more innocent and appeal to the public a bit better, as if like, oh, he's just like this troubled individual who just like had a hard time. And again, it's one of these instances where you just don't hate the media enough. It was like, do you think that the kid on the left is the one who engaged in this? No, it was the guy who was on the right, but they're trying to appeal as best they can with the emotional appeal by using the imagery on the left. Now, and this is a constant thread. They do this here in the States too. They do this only, as far as I can see, only with minority groups such as blacks and Hispanics and blacks and browns, whatever you want to call it. And again, to engage in an effort to minimize the impact of their violence and criminal activity as much as they humanly possibly can. Now, here's an 11-second clip from on the ground footage just to show you just the level of which the aggression is going, because I haven't put anything on air yet of what's happening. Now, I'm not going to play it in its entirety. We can just take a look at this. You can see the fire raging. Now, this is just of a protest that happened in the street. It looks like burnt tires there. As far as I understand, there have been 2 hotels that were specifically designed, or not designed, that were specifically tasked with housing migrants as facilities, were both burned. Not all the way to the ground, but they were attacked and burned. And you can see here, this is just some of the street activities going on between the 2 vast mobs of people, one of which being largely Islamic and of the migrant foreign crowd, and the other being a bunch of white natives, which again goes back to it being a issue and tension between the colors of their skin, and less so about the actual religious differences between the 2 groups. Now, to echo this sentiment, though, it's a trap, bring in Admiral Akbar. This is Alex Jones. And you get another instance there, we'll play here in just a second, but he says, I understand why the people are mad, but they are walking into a trap. Now, this one went viral, 4.2 million views, 40,000 likes. I mean, Alex Jones can, honestly, anything he touches turns to gold, really. I mean, because he's just that polarizing. But again, he echoes the sentiment that once this pressure valve is kind of released, and all of these people kind of, get their anger out, it's going to be a massive sweep of all of these people, the majority of them white. I doubt many of the Muslims or the foreigners will be gathered up in the same regard, and they will be imprisoned for Lord knows how long due to their far-right thuggery, as the Prime Minister put it. Now, again, we don't need the sound for this too, but this is the Rutherford that was besieged. Now, what you don't see on clip here, because this isn't the right one, but this was the hotel. It was the first one that was set ablaze by the far-right protests, because, again, they are showing that they don't want the immigration there. Again, if it was about Muslims, I would imagine I would be seeing a lot more videos about mosques and Qurans being burnt. I've not seen a lot of that. It's really only pointing to the fact of the immigration policy in which they heavily, heavily dislike. Now, as I'd already said, there are 2 camps of thought on this, and one much larger than the other, one being that everything is organic, period, and the other being that there might be a possible false flag and inorganic, which really means that Nick Fuentes and Keith Woods versus everybody else. So he even had an appearance on Alex Jones, which I put that earlier, but here's some of his tweets, actually, to echo some of these sentiments here. This is from Fuentes. He says, another wave of astroturfed anti-Muslim sentiment right before the Muslim false flags that bring us to war against Iran and ISIS. Textbook, my prediction, 0 deportations and 2 more wars for Israel. Again, not my prediction. That is from Nick Fuentes. But I see where he's coming from. Given the rhetoric coming from the Prime Minister and from the government officials too, it seems like they're also kind of backing that up. Now, you can see this top comment, which he didn't even get ratioed, but the top comment here says, rare Nick L. Now, this is also where I can find both of these ideas to be plausible. And if you're asking me to, I guess I would need to see a bit more, but I can see both of these ideas being plausible. One, that it's completely organic, and that it's just the Prime Minister doing their best attempt to just like say like, oh, they just hate Muslims, without a connection to what that may mean. But the timing, you have to admit, is kind of curious, seeing how we are on the verge of some kind of global conflict with the Middle East. Once again, similar to what you saw during 9/11, a ridiculous rise in the sentiment of being anti-Muslim and anti-Islam, and this to go along and pair alongside it. If you're asking me, I think both are very plausible, and I think he brings up a very good point, which is could be not even just a false flag, but that this event is simply being used as a stepping stone to catapult everyone's heart and soul into the war and to be very anti-Muslim, given the fact of how it's being played out. So some more sentiment in another tweet from Fuentes to continue this, just to bring his argument to perspective, because it's not being, I guess it's the lesser known argument about this, and seems to be more people are currently just kind of accepting that it's all organic. Fuentes says, 1, the UK Labour government drops opposition to the ICC arrest warrant for Netanyahu. 2, the UK Labour government imposes secret arms embargo against Israel. And 3, Zionist Tommy Robinson holds massive rally, triggering nationwide civil unrest. So again, all of these things pointing to relaxing on Israel. Meanwhile, the sentiment being of anti-Muslim going down, paired with, once again, the global conflict that we're just sitting on the precipice of, as you just saw, with American carrier groups and Marines heading to the Middle East right now. Again, in preparation to ensure that the people give their pre-programmed consent of like, oh yeah, I do hate Muslims. Let's go bomb them. And I think maybe that's what they're playing on, and that seems to be what Nick's argument is here, is that in fact, it's really just an excuse to get a lot of people in that party arrested to then catapult a global conflict, which I can see. And to be honest, it's happened before. It's probably going to happen again. So again, I find his argument to be plausible. I'm not convinced one way or the other. Again, I'm somebody who waits till the last minute to confirm something. I don't like to make predictions. But I mean, I will give predictions as well. It's not like I won't. But in this issue particular, with so many moving pieces, I just think it's too hard to tell. But I think it's, to be objective as possible, I'm going to give you both sides of everything I'm seeing. So to aid Nick Fuentes' sentiment, though, I will bring you this because, again, it's another thing I'm not seeing being reported. And this is going to the sentiment of the fact that October 7th was itself a false flag to help garner the anti-Muslim sentiment here in the States. He says here, and I mean around the globe too, I act like the States is the most important thing. This is from Leading Report. Breaking: 9 United Nations staff may have been involved in the October 7th attack on Israel, according to the UN. Again, something which is very recent, it's only from 3 p.m. today, but I think that aids the plausibility of what Nick Fuentes is saying, which is if there was actual outside interference that led to the impact or led to the October 7th attack occurring, I think that actually speaks to the fact that it could have been a false flag orchestrated by other global powers that be in order to drum up once again that sentiment needed to send the United States to war, which would be a vast sentiment of being anti-Muslim, one of which you would have seen again shortly after 9/11. Now, to move on from this though, I have this saying, black pills for everybody. Keith Woods and Fuentes, they're not sold on the social stunts of what Trump is doing as well. And this is going to be kind of a harsher segue away. But again, I think this speaks to a lot of astroturfing and what is going on in the digital economy. A lot of people just don't buy, truly. I mean, and this speaks to, kind of like all these crazy weird videos you see of like these crazy cat ladies. And they're saying, oh man, like we're gonna lose the election. Look how many crazy cat ladies are making fun of JD Vance. And it's like, I don't really buy that. Because at the same time, it's like, do we really forget how 2020 happened? I mean, dude, bro, we literally have a graph of Wisconsin that's like, dude, up and over. It's like, bro, they stole it, And like, I mean, like, and I'll put my chest on that. Like, they literally rigged the election. They said it themselves in a news article. They fortified the election as best they could. And to think that reality might not happen in a more egregious manner is like, come on, dude. The United States will definitely do some stuff like that. Or let me put it better. The deep state would definitely do something along those lines. And so when you see sentiments like this following Trump going on Aiden Ross's show and, the live stream, does it really have an impact? I'm not sure. I think it would probably sway some people, because those people who may be like, I like current thing, and they see Aiden Ross, an influencer of usual current thing, being hippy dippy with Donald Trump, could possibly swing some momentum back in his favor, particularly with the youth, because I believe Aiden Ross does have a much younger demographic of people that he reaches. But just to make the point, though, this is Keith Woods saying this will have absolutely no effect on the election outcome. I can't go that far. I would imagine it would have some sway, but maybe minimal or marginal. And if that is the case, then maybe what is the point of this? Maybe there are better avenues to go and actually push for. Perhaps maybe Donald Trump coming out with a crazy kind of statement on what's going on in the UK and giving a support to the far-right thuggery, and to back up his parallel view of mass deportations he would implement here in the States. Wishful thinking, I guess, on my end. And then you have, you're wrong, Keith, it will. He says, no, I'm right, it won't. But I actually had another bookmark tweet here from Fuentes. Forgive me, I can't speak right now. He says it's just a temporary bump. It's just one Bloomberg poll. We're not weird. She only filled a stadium by twerking. Trump still has 53% on PredictIt, but Aiden Ross steamed with Trump, and he says you are here there at the bottom. Now I will say that's very true. Ever since the assassination attempt, what seemed to be, oh, it's in the bag, oh my gosh, literally dissipated overnight, and now we're back to it's a hand toss, it's up in the air, which I think speaks volumes to the fact that Trump kind of fumbled the momentum that he had there, by kind of backing away from his actual morals, or at least his 2016 energy. Something that I'm not even seeing that much of, and I wish I was. And just again, to be objective and show you that there are those who are inside the dissident right, who are closer to circles of where I'm at, that find this to be honestly a bit of a joke. And that's where Nick Fuentes and Keith Woods are coming from. And again, I think once you're in the fifth generational warfare aspect, where we are here right now in this moment in time, and probably for the last few years, if not even a bit longer than that, it really is hard to tell how much of the internet truly does impact people. Now, obviously, it has big sways and little sways. But when it comes to the election, and then with us being blinded by what can occur with the voting machines and mail-in voting, and absentee balloting and things of that nature too, it's hard to say how much of the slight bump in voting you may get from an Aiden Ross stream would compare to a fortification of the election, given that they get the chance to do so. Especially then we see, I believe it's in Maryland, is assigning an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot to every household, and then they're also at the same time pulled back their voter ID requirement, meaning that they're just literally sending out ballots that can be filled out by anybody and with no verification process afterwards, blatantly opening a path for illegals to get a chance to vote in our election and sway it, while only receiving benefits from it and putting nothing into it. So again, some kind of black-pilling sentiments. I'm not trying to end on a bad note. But to give everyone all sides of everything that I'm seeing, and put it in the best kind of purview that I have, because again, I do find both of these to be plausible. I'm not someone who's very, very tribal in any aspect when it comes to any camp. I'm really my own person when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So I try to just give my take without consuming what other people kind of just put out, and then just think of in my own head organically what I think of the situation. Now, we'll say Fuentes continues here. He says, the Trump campaign is in need of a serious course correction. It is now undeniable that Harris will be competitive, and the Trump campaign has been losing momentum since Biden dropped out. I agree 100%, and I think, if anything, the fact that in the PredictIt market, the polling market, which is the most voluminous of all markets when it comes to this, at least has the most people betting in them in its current time frame, shows that it's a toss-up between Kamala Harris and Trump, is kind of breaking the all of the sentiments put earlier in the year, where everybody said, oh man, if they have to go to Kamala Harris, they definitely can't be Kamala Harris, because no way, because people wouldn't vote for her. And then how quickly that wishful thinking dissipated, and now we're sitting here and staring at a 49% split on many polls and many PredictIt markets in the macro, not even swing states. It's a terrifying sentiment, and I think it speaks to how low IQ the average voter has begun. Forgive me. Because again, if you weren't with me here in the beginning, Kamala Harris has no policies she's putting forward, outside of, confiscating guns, similar to how Australia wanted to do it. But also that she can't even speak. She has no charisma. She has no background. In fact, her background, her body of work is only damaging to her career. And so to see that the public or the left rather, and which includes a lot of the public, is going to vote for her purely because she's black and a woman and she's up against Trump, speaks to how effective the brainwashing has been over the last few years. And it's honestly, truly sad. And if anything, it speaks to my argument, which is we need to figure out how we can repeal the 19th as soon as humanly possible. And I'm not going to sit here and echo, oh, these white liberal women. It's women across the board. I think Andrew Wilson had a great point with the Crucible. he brought up, it's a tragedy that your vote cancels out mine. And I thought that was a pretty good way to put it, because especially because the lady was like, "Well, I don't know what to think about homeless people. I don't know what to think about this." And he's like, "And you're going to go vote?" She's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh my gosh." And I think that kind of wraps it up, where it's like you have a lot of people who vote who are very, very low information voters. Maybe not even low IQ, but people who don't pay attention. And it is a tragedy that their votes hold equal weight to someone who is in the fight all the time, who is paying attention all the time, who has a treasure trove more of information at hand and knowledge to understand how things will impact and affect in the future, and at least have a vision for that. It is tragic, and I think it speaks. Even if you don't want to come and join me on the repeal the 19th argument, I think we can all agree and say we can't keep pushing forward with this idea of democracy and voting as it is right now, especially when you show all the different disparities between the different demographics. It's honestly, it's damaging this country. And Jeff Younger even commented on one of my posts not too long ago, saying cultural liberalism is worse than communism, and I'm slowly reaching that point, to be honest with you.